So this explains a lot of the reason your life is the way it is. And by knowing this, again, it will help you to see the future. What did happen in 1971? Well, on August 15th of 1971, President Nixon went on TV and said, "Today I have directed Secretary Connally to temporarily suspend the convertibility of the dollar into gold." Temporarily.
Accordingly, I have directed the Secretary of the Treasury to take the action necessary to defend the dollar against the speculators. I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States.
Milton Friedman once said, "There is nothing so permanent as a temporary government program." Now, so that was the day that August 15th of 71, we severed the final link between our currency and money. We used to have money, gold, real gold, backing our currency that we use as the medium of exchange, and they were fully convertible back and forth. So, WTF happened in 1971. Well, when we severed the tie between real money and fiat currency, the fiat currency that is in our wallets. None of it, no country on earth uses money. They all use national fiat currencies, and national fiat currencies leak. They bleed value.
The American financial house has a smoke alarm too. It's called the price of gold and the price of silver. When the price of gold and silver go dramatically higher, it warns people and alerts people that the currency is being abused, and people then, it becomes reinforcing unto itself, because that creates a domino effect where people buy more and more metal. It makes the metal's price go higher quicker.
Now this here is called paper. This is, how do you spell Zimbabwe? This is the US dollar. This is the future of the US dollar. It's a piece of paper. And millions of people are working for this, but this is God's money. It's been here since planet Earth was started. So every time people say, is it gold, silver, Bitcoin, it's just not this. That's all I'm saying. I want anything but this. But every school teacher, because they're all highly unionized, this is what they want. And my complaint over the years, Danielle, is why don't they teach kids about money in school? But the reason is those idiot school teachers, which my family is a bunch of idiots because they all went to school. They're professors and all this. They love this stuff. Every teacher loves this stuff. And they teach this to the kids. You should love this stuff. I don't go, well, that's 10 million Zims. Which would you rather have? A $30 gold Eagle or 10 million Zim?
You take it to the financial markets where you've had a 50-year credit bubble since they went off the gold standard in 1971. You get the polarization of wealth and income, and you have the setup here where you tie that in. There's all this volatility and all this kind of seemingly kind of docile chaos is what it really is. And you get to the point where you come to mathematical issues around how much money the Federal Reserve and other central banks around the world have to print each time you go through one of these little down waves. And now the angle of ascent of money growth, the angle of ascent of debt, the angle of ascent of monetization of debt is virtually straight up and down. And that sets up a situation down the road where you're going to have to be really careful, really in touch, and really nimble and flexible with your investments to make sure that you can not only survive, but theoretically great opportunities to be had here as well.
I know. Let me just ramble for 30 seconds more. The Fed spent years and years saying we need 2% inflation. We cannot exist as a species, or as an existential threat, if we don't have 2% inflation in an economy. Well, central bank used to say, the Fed was enacted, by Congress in 1913. It used to be stable prices, which means zero inflation. Then it became, oh, we need 2% inflation. Then it became, oh, we need 2% plus inflation to make up for all the years we weren't at 2% inflation. And then it became, well, no, we need to make sure that we end all racial inequality in the United States. Then it became, oh, we have to eliminate all greenhouse gases in the United States before we, stop printing money. Now, I'm all for racial equality, and I'm an environmentalist, so let's get that out of the way. But is that the purview of the Federal Reserve? I'm not really sure that, printing money can eliminate greenhouse gases or solve racial inequity. Just saying. So like you said, if you were in the poor, the lower classes, the lower quintile of the United States, you spend maybe 35, 40% of your income on what? Food, energy, shelter, clothing. But what gets hit the hardest?
And so we're kind of in this weird situation where the system's kind of run its course. And so we're still trying to kind of maintain that, even though it's really no longer benefiting from us. And so over time, what the United States has is a declining net international investment position. So when we became the world reserve currency in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, we were by far the biggest creditor nation in the world, meaning that Americans owned more foreign assets than the foreigners owned of American assets. And so now the United States is actually the world's biggest debtor nation, meaning that foreigners own more American assets than American own foreign assets, because we've run these big trade deficits, we put dollars into the world, and the world has reinvested those dollars back into owning parts of our debt, owning parts of our companies, owning parts of our real estate. But that creates a problem that if you have the United States declining as a percent of global GDP, and yet the overall amount of dollar-based debt in the world is increasing, that creates a weird dichotomy where there's just not a lot of dollars going out there. Even despite the fact that we're running these trade deficits, even those big trade deficits are arguably not enough to get enough dollars out into the world to reliably service those debts, because all those debts represent demand for the dollar. And so that's what a lot of macro analysts have been referring to as a global dollar shortage. And so we started to see, that also exposed those countries to sanctions, right? So if they have dollar-based debts, and the United States says, okay, you're cut off from the SWIFT system, you're basically cut off from the dollar-based system, then those countries are in trouble financially. And so there's been this kind of growing incentive for some countries to begin moving away from the system. And so there's some that are more aggressive in it than others. And so we see, for example, Europe's our ally for the most part, but they still, they built the euro currency. There's tons of flaws with it, but they still wanted to have more sovereignty with their own currency, and so they've unified their currencies. But then more recently, we have Russia, for example, where Russia is obviously one of the nations is not on very friendly terms with the United States. They also have a pretty large military and aeronautic power, right? So they're not easily bullied by global influences. And so and they're a big commodity and oil producer. And so they've actually begun pricing a lot of their energy in euros. And so both their trade with Europe and their trade with China has de-dollarized pretty quickly and has euroized. We also see around the margins that China is using some of its local currency for commodity acquisition, but then also using the euro to some extent. And so we're seeing this somewhat of a decentralization among global countries about basically no longer growing their dollar-based reserves, diversifying their reserves, but then also diversifying the types of payments they use when they're acquiring commodities or other trade attributes. And so really on both sides of the aisle, both the United States and the world, this current system is just not working out anymore for a lot of reasons.
The reason it's important, then again, is because the dollar is being, let's just say, lessened in terms of its importance in global trade settlement. I've made the claim now for quite some time that cryptocurrencies are being used to settle international trade accounts. Specifically, I referenced China, Venezuela, China, Iran energy deals. And those are being settled in cryptocurrency. And people have started to say to me, Rob, how do you know that cryptocurrencies are being used to settle international trade accounts? So I want to just direct people to the website coinmarketcap.com, and you can just type in BTC for Bitcoin and look at the latest volume for 24 hours in trade in Bitcoin. Well, in the latest 24-hour period, $60 billion worth of Bitcoin is traded. And in the latest 24 hours, if you type in ETH, which is the symbol for Ethereum, you'll see that Ethereum is traded $55 billion in the latest 24 hours. So let's add the two together. It brings you to 115 billion just with the two biggest coins, Ethereum and Bitcoin. And if you take that to a monthly run rate, you're at 3.5 trillion in trade for those two coins in the latest month. So a 3.5 trillion a month run rate on those two coins leads to an annual run rate of 42 trillion. Okay, global GDP is not 80 trillion. So we have the two biggest cryptocurrencies that have 42 trillion in yearly, if you annualize it, an annual turnover. And you tell me how 42 trillion versus a global GDP of under 80 trillion, how a big chunk of that is not global trade settlement. You see, 42 trillion, even in today's watered down currency terms, buys a lot of love. And there's no other way to explain it. And frankly, anybody who can't see that necessarily means that they're being used for international trade settlement, I'm sorry, you're ignorant, and you need to go and take some economics courses. Economics 101 is a good place to start. And that's really all you need to know. And there really isn't much more to say about it than that. It's just ridiculous to suggest or say otherwise. It actually shows a very low level of intellect and understanding and brain power if you can't see that. So I hate to say it that bluntly, but that's the way it is. And that's exactly what's going on right now. It's happening right under our noses. And cryptocurrency transaction volumes continue to escalate every week. So, and they're growing at a phenomenal pace. And this is continuing. So, you can get with the program, accept what's going on, or not. So, but do so at your own peril.
And I think that money needs to be stable and provide the foundation for productive economic growth. And when money is just a variable that financial markets toss around, or it's part of a derivatives formula, or it's part of someone speculating on currencies, it's not serving the private sector in the sense of providing that reliable unit of account so you can make plans. And under a gold standard, you did have that stability, and I think that's what's missing. And so I like the idea of a gold standard. I mean, it could be used in a very cryptocurrency way.
Cryptos and precious metals are anti-dollar trades. I have for years maintained that the anti-dollar trades will do well, and the fiat money values won't hold up. Precious metals have a 5,000. You see, there's no fiat currency that has existed for more than 300 years. The dollar, you can say, the dollar of today is not the dollar of 100 years ago at all, because the dollar of 100 years ago was backed by gold. So, and it was freely exchangeable for gold. So it was basically a proxy of gold. And fiat money today is a proxy of nothing. So other than each other. But intrinsically, fiat dollars are worth nothing. They're worth zero. And they will ultimately achieve their true intrinsic value, which is zero. It just takes time. On the other hand, precious metals have been around for at least 5,000 years. Some would argue longer. and they've never gone to zero. I find it hilarious when central bankers refer to cryptocurrencies as being the realm of criminals. I mean, you know, the preferred currency of criminals for the last 100 years has been the US dollar. I mean, it's preposterous to state that suddenly anybody who engages in trade in crypto is a criminal. It's intuitively, it's just a non-starter. It doesn't work.
Look, the system, as you well know, demands that debt be borrowed into existence in greater and greater amounts. Without this mechanism, the whole thing implodes. We turn into Mad Max. We literally get a worst case scenario. And what they're doing is trying to keep this all afloat by printing, by adding digits to a screen, creating massive distortions across the spectrum of asset classes like we've never seen before. Artificially suppressed rates have created a bubble environment in everything. We have inverse bubbles, we have super bubbles, mega bubbles, the debt. Nothing makes sense. All we do know, again, is this will correct to a fair value, whatever that is, and no one's smart enough to know. I don't think, maybe you are, I'm not. I'm not smart enough to know. All I do know is the environment we are in is twisted, and people are being set up here. It's already the largest wealth transfer we've ever seen. We have what now, 60% of small businesses here in the United States closed forever, with corporate America is now stronger than they have ever been. Wall Street is going to get their highest bonuses ever on record. While look
Main
around
Street.
you.
Yeah.
Does this make sense? It's insane. I'm going to shut my mouth so you can say something. But I mean, as you can see, I am very passionate about this, and it just drives me nuts when I hear the lies, when I hear the propaganda. We're in a V-shaped recovery. No, it's a super V-shaped recovery. We're adding jobs. We're adding nothing. We haven't even begun to see this thing unwind yet. Not even close. I mean, look, the system is so twisted. Not only are people in more debt than they've ever been, okay, but they continue to borrow. I don't understand what's wrong with these people. I don't know how they're doing it. I don't know what they're doing. Well, right now, I mean, look, everything is all whacked out right now. But people are carrying a higher debt load than they've ever had. The Federal Reserve is they're buying debt of Dow components. They're buying debt here. It's unfreaking believable what we're seeing here. But people sit there, they don't even understand what any of this is. So they just go about, they walk through time and space. Oh, look, everything is great. We are in a V-shaped recovery. Duh. You got to be kidding me. Okay. We can look. People just, I mean, they have eyes to see. They have ears, but they're fixated on that box that sits in their house or their phone or these computers, and they're listening to the lies and the propaganda from the mainstream media, from the politicians here, and they think they're being told everything is fine. And this is, I mean, honestly, this is the most twisted environment we have ever been in. If we had a real leader, that person, whether he or she or whatever, would say, we got troubles, people, this is what we need to do, and this is how I'm going to fix it. But no, instead of that, we got someone telling us that we're in a super V-shaped recovery. You got to be high as a kite or stoned, or I don't know what it is, to believe the propaganda right now, but people are. That the middle class, if they don't act, if they have not been acting, and I think most people have not, how many people, Lynette, you know the answer to this, are actually holders of physical gold or physical silver or or own things? They don't. A fraction of the people are doing this. A fraction of the people are doing it. Most people, again, they live in some kind of twisted reality because of the box that they're listening to. People dictate their lives to them. They're having their lives dictated to them, and they're marching along like the sheep that they are. And this is unfortunately why they're being led to the slaughter. This has been the story throughout history since the beginning of time, and it will never stop. This is the Federal Reserve who killed the global economy so they could finish their final solution since 1913 to be the lender and buyer of last resort so they could own it all. And that's what they're doing now. We haven't seen anything yet, and I think you would agree, with regard to what the Federal Reserve is about to do. How much more debt they're going to issue. They're talking about suppressing rates now, what, to at least 2026? How did they do that? Right, right. People don't understand what that means. How does the Federal Reserve do it? Did he just say, hey, I'm going to snap my fingers and we're going to keep rates low? No, the Fed has to create the cash out of thin air and buy the debt. That's what they do. This is how they keep rates suppressed. They're determined to kill the dollar. I think we're all obviously well aware of that. This is why we're betting against the debt. This is why we're becoming our own central bank. Holding gold, holding silver. My favorite asset of all time is silver. I've never wavered from that since the first day I sat down in front of a computer. When I thought about what was going on, when I put that book together there, and I was looking at the market through the lens of, okay, what's being suppressed here? You know, because money, as you well know, doesn't go to money heaven. It just moves around. So what's going on? Where's the game? The game, in my view, and it still remains, is they are artificially suppressing the price of gold and silver via the derivative. You know the mechanism better than anybody else, how it works. And this is what they continue to do. And what does that tell us? This is what we need to be in.
Exactly, because at the same time they're doing that, they're buying it hand over fist.
Yeah, well, of course, they're keeping the prices suppressed as much as they possibly can. I don't know one person that most people that I know, in fact, no, all people that I know that had a few dollars. Okay, I'm talking about people that have a little liquid. All of them own gold and own silver and platinum and palladium and cryptocurrencies as well, and they're probably involved in the market one way or the other, but most people, they're not. They don't hold it. And you talk to people and say, you need to own a physical piece of physical gold. You need to own a piece of physical silver. They look at you like, really? You can own that? They don't even know it's available. Most people don't even know that they can own this stuff. They're like, really? You mean I can actually own a bar of silver, pure silver? I'm like, yeah.
Just based on your honest opinion, is going to hit, say, where do you feel that XRP, just based on your honest opinion, is going to hit, say, a month after regulation?
Yeah. So we believe that the last domino to fall on regulation right now is the SEC lawsuit, and that could be resolved in a variety of ways, but it could also be resolved in regulation coming in over the top. We know it's imminent, though, right? So when I say imminent, I would be surprised if a quarter from now we're really still embroiled in the SEC lawsuit, because I think the state of affairs throughout the world is such that we're going to need a solution like an XRP for liquidity purposes sooner rather than later. So the question is then, okay, we've magically resolved it. Where does the price go? It's easy to project that it's a double-digit number. So I think it immediately shoots up to a $10, potentially $20. The wild card to me is that there is actually a deal to be done among the central banks and governments to basically have XRP work as the world's bridge currency, a neutral asset that could be traded between the central banks to move a specific type of fiat to another type of fiat. If that's what occurs, it's back to what we were discussing earlier. It's got to cover kind of all the money. And I think you're looking at a range that XRP would settle on agreement. So this would happen instantaneously, somewhere between $10,000 and $35,000 a coin. And our lives will be, maybe the same, maybe different. I don't know. Probably a little different.